I had lots of questions and comments on extinction, and apparently it's a quite popular subject. And I can't answer all the questions for sure, but I do what I can here, okay? So here, let me start it with this. I received this in my email, okay? And it says that I won the lottery to become a U.S. resident. I guess these people didn't know who they sent it to. And what I really get out of this is that this shows how close we are to extinction. We have all these scams everywhere on the internet. That's what people do for a living these days. They just do scams, and it just makes you wonder. You know, you have companies set up, and they hire people to just call you on the phone or send you a message or whatever. All that scamming gives you an idea that, you know, there is no work out there. And so people have to do scamming, and essentially what we're all doing, or a lot of people out there doing, is living off the fat of the land, of what our forefathers created and bequeathed to us. And all these people are just living off that wealth, okay, that's still around. But right now, you know, we're not creating new wealth, not at the rate as we used to create it around the planet. Okay, here's one fellow who says that I'm skipping over the extinction part of my video last time, right? Because Bill's opinions are just that. Poor fellow, he doesn't know the difference between a theory and an opinion. An opinion is religion, okay? That's what it is, okay? And we're not talking about opinions here. We're talking about a theory. Some people say that the dinosaurs, for example, died because an asteroid hit the Earth. Other people say that in the Permian, the animals in those days died because of volcanic activity. If you go to the Ordovician, they say, well, those guys died because there was a supernova. And I'm saying that they all died, all of them, because there was an economic collapse. What collapsed was their food disappeared. And when their food sources disappeared, first gradually, you know, you have fewer and fewer species because they have fewer and fewer niches to occupy. And then also, not only do you have fewer varieties, but you also have less volume. And so those animals eventually at some point crash, they go away, and a new food chain emerges. And that's the theory. Am I asking you to believe the theory? No, that's my proposal. See, I can talk about the theory of relativity. That doesn't mean I believe in it. I'm just exposing a theory, and I try to present it objectively. That's what science is about. And this person believes it's an opinion. No, it's not an opinion. It's a theory. It's called a theory. It's called an explanation. Okay. Okay. Another fellow says, dinosaurs are a hoax. He thinks that these are old whale and elephant bones cobbled together for the amusement of the crowds. Those things that you see there. Okay, well, let's find out. Here, you know, a short while ago, they discovered the skeleton, the whole skeleton, really, of King Richard III. And here he is. This is what he looks like. And they reassembled it, and they were able to tell that, yeah, that was the body of Richard III, because they looked at some of his descendants, and they had the same DNA, okay, or similar DNA. They were able to confirm that this was the guy, and they found him at Bosworth Field there, you know. And so they can take a skull, for example, and because of that, they can say, okay, this is more or less what this person looked like. It doesn't have to be exact, but you can more or less get a picture of what this person looked like in real life. Okay, and that's what they do. They you know, you have these artists that study facial features in quite a bit of detail, and they are able to reassemble, you could say, you know, reconstruct a face. In fact, you know, you have all these medical examiners and forensic people, and they do that a lot to solve crimes. Okay, and so here's this. You find this in the rock. Okay, find these big heads, these skulls. Are those elephant skulls or whale skulls? What are those? Maybe an old rhino that died. Is that what a rhino looks like? And you can see that, you know, you're not going to be able to relate those skulls with any animal alive today, whether whale or what is it, or elephant or rhino for that matter, right? So yeah, you know, it's nice to say these things, but you know, again, what I think these people are is just religious people who don't like their theories. Give me a second here. They don't like to be able to have their religion trashed. and they have these beliefs. And when they see something like that, they just turn their heads away and they say, well, I'm not going to look at that. I don't believe in that. It's like saying you're looking at black and you're going to call it white. That's more or less what these people are doing. Okay. Anyways, another individual says, oh, I went to the other side. In a second here. Get them from the bottom. Says, your observation that humans have low genetic diversity. I think you are working with faulty data there. Indeed, with billions of humans on the planet, you're bound to have a large measure of genetic diversity, particularly with the large migrations going on, spreading mutant or rare genes. This fellow knows very little about genetic diversity, obviously. Depending on how you define genetic diversity, humans are practically identical to chimpanzees. What you measure is what you get. No. Absolutely not. Here's an article, okay, and this came out a few years ago, and there was a couple studies, in fact, this is just one of them, where they did, in fact, compare chimps, and they took a troop, maybe 50 to 100 chimps in Africa, in some country in Africa, and they found that just these 50 to 100 individuals, chimps, had more genetic diversity than the entire human race. Listen to that, you know, just a small group had more genetic diversity than the entire human race. And you say, how can that possibly be? You would think it's the other way around. And again, you know, people are mistaken in their notions of genetic diversity, of what it means and what it entails and how it got there, okay? Obviously, they don't do much of a research on these subjects, okay? And they just have these beliefs, okay? And here's a study on famous Amish who've been inbreeding for the last 300 years, and they're having all kinds of problems, and they're traceable to the founder effect, the fact that they had few people from where all the population today of Amish descend. Okay, they descend from a very small group of people in the hundreds, and here we have hundreds of thousands today. Okay, there's I think 350,000 Amish in the region, Ohio, Indiana, Pennsylvania, you know, that whole Amish region, and they all descend from essentially the same founders. And that have been inbreeding for so long a time, and that's why they study these groups, because they're like isolated communities, and they're having all kinds of problems. They're, like you see there, they're having the 6 fingers people. They have a thumb and 5 fingers. Okay, and here's an analysis of what genetic diversity is. More or less, this is a synthesis, okay? The 3 major forces shaping the genetic variation in the present Amish population are genetic drift, recombination, and mutation, okay? Because of their unique ancestral history, a modest number of founders account for all genetic variation present in the current Old Order Amish population. As a consequence, while many rare variants entering the population on only a single founder chromosome have become lost, others have increased in frequency through genetic drift and can be found at appreciable frequencies in the current population. Okay, so what's going on with the Amish is that because they've been inbreeding for so long, they lost genetic diversity. They don't have any diversity within their community, and so you know, because of this, essentially this inbreeding process that's been going on for so long, they're having problems with children that are born today. Okay, and yeah, that's one theory. Other people might have a different idea about it. I'm just telling you what my conclusion is from this and from the studies that I looked at, and I put that in my book. Okay, here's what I put in my book. I put what I call the law of genetic diversity. And what this law of genetic diversity is that essentially, you know, after a species is born, in other words, when it comes out of the mother trunk and gets isolated and they start reproducing, at first because they encounter new environmental conditions, which selects their genes, their genetic diversity increases. But then after that, you know, what happens, as long as they continue inbreeding, and more so when they become sedentary, what happens is they lose their genetic diversity. And I think that's what's happened to the Amish. I think that happened also to the Neanderthals. If you check a lot of studies that's been done on the Neanderthals, they discovered that they didn't have much genetic diversity at all. And the genetic diversity started falling from about 80,000 years ago to about 40,000 years ago, the Upper Paleolithic. So I think there's a trend between genetic diversity, inbreeding, and time. And you can only lose genetic diversity after that. You can never recover it. We humans, we cannot recover our genetic diversity. There's nothing we can do about it. we can't sleep with a chimp. You might say, well, we can tailor it technologically, with some kind of thing in the lab. Good luck. Okay, I don't know what they're going to turn you into, because the more they change, the less human you become. And so again, we're like the end of the line, and this is how humans end. With whatever genetic variation we have, in our populations. That's it. Okay. Another fellow says technology. Raising the issue of technology. Technology is a double-edged sword, and I'm sure could just as likely cause the crash in food availability. You posit. This is something we don't have. What evidence? That's what they think about. Evidence from past extinctions to work with. Yeah, I don't think you're going to find too much technology in the dinosaurs. Okay, so it's not too much. It's not that you won't find any technology. We're the only real animal that has, mammal especially, that has used technology in any meaningful way. All the others essentially just do food. Some of them, like beavers, they build houses and so on. You could say that there is some level of technology somewhere in the animal kingdom, but essentially we're it. That's it. Okay, and then he goes into, again, the notion that people have that all these are catastrophic events. He says extinction level events can be ruled out. Can't be ruled out. If the Yellowstone supervolcano erupts, it would wipe out American grain production and, allied to the fragile nature of the world's food economy, cause an extinction event. Again, these people think that it's all catastrophic, and it has nothing to do with catastrophes. It has to do with our economy, at least my theory. So he says that's kind of a hybrid version of your thesis. No, absolutely not. Mine has nothing to do with climate change, which is one of the ones he mentions down there. It has nothing to do with technology, has nothing to do with disease, has nothing to do with asteroid strikes or any catastrophe for that matter. It has to do with the disappearance of food. In the case of humans, food disappears. Why? Because money disappears. And without money, no one produces or distributes food. That's in a nutshell the theory. You can look up some of my videos there. It goes into more detail. But it's when people introduce this climate change and technology and they get all confused because they think that's what I'm talking about, that somehow they can fit that in. And it's not true. It's none of these have anything to do with my theory. My theory says that food disappears, humans disappear. It's as simple as that. Why will food disappear? Because money disappears. Why will money disappear? Well, that's a long story, and that's another issue that someone raised here, so let me wait for that. And this fellow says, humans, when their abstract concept, meaning money, I guess, disappears, they starve themselves and go extinct. I'll be over here growing my own food and free of vax and morons. So all I can put is Bob Dylan's song, talking World War III blues, and he said, hey, I've been having the same old dreams, but mine was a little different, you see. I dreamt that the only person left after the war was me. I didn't see you around, not in my dream, right? Well, now time passed, and now it seems everybody's having them dreams. Everybody sees themselves walking around with nobody else, no one else. Yeah, that's more or less. Everybody thinks he's going to be the one who survives and see nobody around him. And yeah, I guess it's very hopeful. I hope you've taken all the precautions for that, right? Looked ahead, right? But of course, if you don't believe that humans are going to become extinct, then you don't do anything about it. It's just as simple as that. Okay, and here's one fellow, and he says, he's the fellow I was talking about a minute ago. And he says, the fellow says, do you need money for food? Poverty kills, go figure. Did you mean no money for the rich, or did you mean money for the rich and less for the poor? But then he asks the right question, and that's the question everybody wants answered, at least from me, because that's my theory. He says, what is the mechanism that leads to no money? That's a long talk there, the process. I have to write it up. All I can tell you is that the theory is that money will disappear, and yeah, people want to know what is the process that leads to the extinction of money. Why will man stop trading, essentially? That's what it comes down to, okay? And that's a long process. It happens in a very short time, but you got to look at each one of the frames in the movie. Okay, you got to look at each frame in the movie to what happens here and there and in the other place, and you got to look at the whole planet. Okay, and you got to look at the economy of the entire planet. And all I can tell you right now in general terms is the human economy cannot grow forever. More so when population doesn't grow forever. And population cannot grow first because it's right now growing asymptotically. Our birth rate for the global birth rate is declining. Okay, that's one issue. And without population, you have no demand. And without no demand, you have no business. Business starts leveling off. They start shutting companies down or merging and laying off workers, and which is more or less the process we see today. But that's in general terms. I would have to go into a lot more detail, and that takes a whole video, a whole lecture. Okay, here's one fellow, and he says, this graph shows the number of species, which is different from the amount of biomass. I put this graph the other day, the Cretaceous terrestrial revolution, and what you see there is a big red blot. And what that red part of the graph are the angiosperms, the flowering plants. And you can see that for half of the Cretaceous, they displaced all the other species. But what this fellow says is those are not the amount of biomass. He's saying those are just the number of species. That's what he's clarifying. Yeah, those are the number of species, but keep in mind that those species multiply not only in variety, but also in quantity. And so the issue is that the angiosperms did displace the gymnosperms. Why? Because by the time you get to the quaternary, you don't see conifers, and today we have few conifers on the planet. So something changed. So not only were there more varieties, but there were more of them as well, more volume. Okay. Anyways, this fellow says the lack of diversity in our food supply is a threat to human existence. We might counter that by selectively breeding plants in a range of laboratory-controlled conditions. Again, these people think this is an issue of technology, that we go to the lab and just do some kind of experiment, produce new varieties, and then we'll be okay. This is what I'm proposing is an economic collapse. No one's going to go to the lab because you got to pay the guy who goes to the lab. And if there's no money because the whole economic system of man has collapsed, then no one's going to go to any lab. No one's going to do any study. Everybody's just going to look for food. That's what happens when the global economy collapses. So this notion that we're just going to develop new breeds of plants by injecting them with some kind of DNA or whatever, yeah, they're doing that even today, but it doesn't mean that's gonna save us. The problem here is not a question of quality, it's gonna be a question of volume. Okay, we're not gonna have the volume of food. Okay, and this is a fellow who wrote a book. His name is Robert Baker, and I do recommend this book. Okay, I read it twice. I like it so much, and I don't agree with much of what Robert Baker says, but the book is a very good book, partly because it's a book about science. It's a book about theories, and that's what I love about that book. It's about theories. You don't have to believe in the theories, but the guy gives it a good crack, and he says, that he's going to be talking about different theories, and just about every chapter is about theories. And he also has a lot of facts because he's a guy who's worked in the field as a paleontologist. Okay, so I do recommend it. He says there, that process there that the animals come in there, they ate, for example, the cycads, and so they wiped them out. And now what happened next was the angiosperms grew in that place, and now that plant disappeared. Now you have a new plant that squatted that piece of land. And now you multiply that times volume times time, and over time then, yes, what you'll see is displacement of the foods that the dinosaurs ate, the cycads and other conifers, and what displaced them were the angiosperms. My theory on that is that the dinosaurs did not eat angiosperms. There's been a couple studies that says that they did. I do not subscribe to those theories. I'm saying that the dinosaurs grew with conifers just like we grew with angiosperms. We do not eat conifers. We do not eat ferns. Okay. And so, it's not like we can switch overnight and say, well, there's no lettuce anymore, no apples. I think I'm going to eat ferns from now on. No, it doesn't happen. And it doesn't happen with us, and it doesn't happen with the animals either, with the rest of the animal kingdom. Animals get used to a certain type of food forever, especially like, in the case of the dinosaurs, they got used to conifers. That's all there was at one point in time. And then right behind them, like I saw, you showed in the graph there, the angiosperms came right behind and sneaked up on them and started growing all over the planet. As far as the dinosaurs were concerned, all those were weeds. They didn't eat weeds. They didn't eat angiosperms. And so when the conifers were essentially, the forest of cycads essentially became smaller and smaller, became small islands, that's when the dinosaurs disappeared. That's my theory on that in general terms. Okay. Okay. Final comment on extinction here. Fellow says invokes Herodotus, who was historian, ancient historian, days of the Greeks. And I had to put the first line there because he missed that. He just put the darker blue there. And it says, this is what Herodotus said. He says, these are the stories of the Persians and Phoenicians. For many states that were once great have now become small, and those that were great in my time were small before. Knowing therefore that human prosperity never continues in the same place, I shall mention both alike. That's more or less how he starts his book, okay, Histories. And yeah, he's right, but see, the notion that China, which is the context here, that China is going to replace the United States as the next empire, no, history will not repeat itself in the last generation on Earth. China has no chance of surpassing the United States because today we have a global economy, something the Persians and Phoenicians did not have. So we have a different world today. Okay, so you cannot just extrapolate ancient history and say, well, there's always been new empires and old empires collapse, and that's what's going to happen in the future. Not anymore. This is it. This is the end. The buck stops here. Why? Because what's going to happen here is that the Americans will not allow a country like China to surpass them, because they know what the consequences of that are. And right now, the United States is kind of nervous because they had quite a bit of losses last year in both jobs and companies. And the Chinese came up and caught up a little more. Not that they caught up, but they're catching up. They're coming up, not only in economics, but militarily as well, and in political influence around the world, and respect, and so all that stuff, right? And so the United States is not going to allow that. And they're going to do whatever it takes to stop China. And it can't stop China from growing, but that might lead to a war, very likely. Like Mr. Kissinger, I heard the other day say, this resembles very much what happened just before World War I, that saber rattling. And I think something like this is going to happen right here as well. It can happen at least. If it does happen, I just hope they keep it to a conventional war. Okay? Or like I think it was Einstein who said, I don't know how the Third World War will be fought, but I know how the fourth one will be. It'll be fought with sticks and stones.